the Brig and Louise Pemberton Collection. Now, those probably aren't household names unless you're deep into the field of Colt Single Action collecting. But if you've ever opened up the book of Colt engraving, you have seen items from the husband and wife team in those pages. Their names mentioned numerous times. You've seen some of these guns. In fact, our president, Kevin Hogan, first saw some of these guns back in 2015 in person. He was impressed then, he's impressed now, calling it the finest group of Colt single actions ever publicly offered.
The Brig and Louise Pemberton Collection. Speaking directly to the collection, it is as fresh as the driven snow. I've never seen a collection more organized or more well-documented than the Brig and Louise Pemberton Collection for cartridge Colts for single actions. I think it's really worthwhile to point out, as we're talking about the Brig and Louise Pemberton, that it is the Brig and Louise Pemberton Collection. So you open to any page in that book of Colt engraving, the second edition, volume 1 or volume 2, and you will see the collection name as the Brig and Louise Pemberton Collection. The point being is that they did this together. But I'll challenge you, go into any firearms book and look at a collection name and see who calls it, it's a husband-wife team. And that's totally relevant that they did this together and that this collection was as much as Louise as it was Brig. And that is noteworthy. So, and I think it's cool. Like I said, I'll go to any gun book and find where the collector lists, maybe it's his name, maybe they have an alias, but it's a husband and wife. I can't think of one. So it's totally relevant in this story and in this situation. Look at the Marshfield find. You know, that's a gun that falls out of the sky. And that's an opportunity for a collector to go, I can put my stamp on this for the first time. I would argue that a lot of the Brig and Louise Pemberton collection is very similar. These guns have, outside of being photographed in Colt engraving, they haven't been around, they haven't been out. And so it's that same opportunity for collectors now in 2024, 2025 to do the same thing. They get to associate their name, their stamp with this gold standard that is going to be, as far as I'm concerned, the finest collection of first generation Colt single actions to ever come to auction.
And for a man who's seen his fair share of elite Colt collections, that's no small statement. It's a collection that's been created and curated. Brig and Louise Pemberton were collecting Colts well before it was popular or in vogue to do so. Some of the factory letters for items on this table are addressed to Mr. Pemberton dating back to the 1960s. So this is the first time in more than half a century that some of these revolvers will have seen the light of day. The Pemberton collection is one of 6 outstanding Colt collections. In our December 6th through 8th premier firearms auction, 6 Colt collections, representing over 250 years of collecting experience. If you're a Colt collector, you cannot afford to miss this event. It is a significant offering of Colts, most likely the most significant in over a century. Now, in selecting Colts for this video, this very easily could have been a video solely on Colt Single Action Armies. This also very easily could have been a video solely on nickel-plated, factory-engraved, custom-gripped Colt Single Action Armies, and that should speak to the depth of the collection. But there's also breadth. There's a number of avenues for Colt collectors to pursue, whether those are engraved guns, unusual calibers, different engravers, different sub-inspectors. You know, it's all there, different models, of course, for Colt collectors. So I've chosen a little bit of the depth, you know, the blue chip, the gold standard Colts that kind of dominate that genre, as well as some of those different avenues to pursue as well, and it's all part of this extraordinary Pemberton collection. Starting us off, a beautiful Colt Single Action Army. As you can see, fantastic condition, 90% gun, and this is a deluxe blue finish. This isn't a standard blue finish. 90% there, and the case hardening is gorgeous. It's even higher. There's a couple reasons this gun is so fascinating. One, is because with its serial number, I believe that's 884, we have that stamped on the cylinder, the butt, and the front of the trigger guard, and its production time is 1877. That puts it in the heart of Colt's rimfire production. So you have 22 rimfire, 44 rimfire. This was converted then at the factory for 44 center fire. So right in the middle of that production run. Very interesting. Second part, what makes it interesting, is that while a lot of the serial numbers say 884, 884, here on the frame, we see some initials, and it says JTC. And these letters look a lot like the same font of a sub-inspector's mark. Now, if your initials have taken the place of a serial number at Colt, you're probably a pretty big deal. And who happens to be the government sub-inspector at Colt in 1877? James T. Cleveland, JTC. Now, with the high polished blue and his initials taking the place of his serial number, this could have been a factory presentation. It could have been a gift. He does leave the Colt factory later that year in 1877. It could have been a favor that he had produced while he was spending so much time in the Colt factory. History isn't clear on it, but what we do still have is a very high condition gun, very high polish. I mean, look at the backstrap. This is just beautifully blued and polished and reflective. This level of condition ties to a known sub-inspector. This is a Colt on a pedestal. Oh, and by the way, the documentation on this addressed to Mr. Pemberton dates back to 1966. So it's one of those that we were referring to a little earlier, absolutely fresh to market in half a century. Fantastic Colt to have on the table. The next Colt on the table, which I'm going to handle very delicately, you need to know just two things about it. Our headline starts out with the words Wilbur Glahn masterpiece, and its condition statement simply says mint. Single word description. Now that's a word, of course, we don't take lightly here at Rock Island Auction Company. So it is a one-word condition statement that speaks volumes. And as you hold it in your hand, you know it is 100% accurate. Wilbur Glahn in the classic configuration, the case hardened, the blued. This is level C coverage of Colt engraving, that engraving on the barrel extending past the ejector rod housing. We have it here at the muzzle. Wonderful checkerboard here on the frame, top strap, just dense coverage everywhere you look. Really spectacular on the recoil shield, especially with those case hardened colors. A fantastic classic Colt, a Wilbur Glahn masterpiece. Now Glahn cuts for Colt, of course, from 1919 to 1950. He comes after Helfrich. That means this comes, of course, at the very end of Colt first generation production. Most of the engraving does. Sources vary a little bit, but there's anywhere from 3,000 to 4,500 Colt first generation single action armies that are factory engraved. And whether you take the most generous or the most conservative estimates, that's 1 to 1.25% of total production. If you go by 3,000, about 2,550 of those are cut by Helfrich. That only leaves 500 for Glahn to have cut for first generation Colt single action armies. He doesn't cut many. Arguably his masterpiece, mint condition, and again, just 4 words. Should have Colt collectors sitting up and paying attention. Wilbur Glahn masterpiece, mint. What else can you say? Next on the table, a gun that could probably have a video all on its own. You can see we have a shorter barrel than our previous 2 entries and a complete lack of ejector here, making this a Colt Sheriff's model. They are extremely rare. They are extremely desirable. How rare and desirable? Well, in all the Colt Single Action Army production, less than 600 Sheriff's models were produced in any caliber. That makes it about 0.17% of total Colt Single Action Army production. So extremely rare. What makes this even more special is that this factory letter tells us that this was sent to New York to be engraved by L.D. Nimschke. Now, we've sold ejectorless Lightnings and Thunderers before that have been engraved by L.D. Nimschke. We have never sold a Sheriff's model engraved by L.D. Nimschke. We have checked our extensive records. We have never offered one before. In fact, the only other one we can find is in the book of Colt Engraving by R.L. Wilson, shows another one of a different serial number. So as far as we know, one of 2 sheriff's models engraved by L.D. Nimschke, and that's not all. This sheriff's model also comes with Texas Ranger history. It comes documented to a Ranger, Benjamin Finn. Finn serves with Company A in the Frontier Battalion, so very, very active in protecting pioneers and settlers at that time. The Rangers actually took this gun off a Desperado, and the Rangers competed to see who would own this gun by taking 5 shots at a bell tower and a bell across the street. And whoever got the best out of 5 would win the revolver, and Ranger Finn rang that bell 5 times and took home this prize of a sheriff's model. The paperwork that comes with this from the Pemberton Collection dates back, it's another one that we mentioned, dates back to, I believe, 1967. Sheriff's model, Nimschke engraved, Texas Ranger history, and absolutely fresh to market in over half a century. What a fantastic sheriff's model to have on the table. The next gun I love, it fits into this really neat pocket of time for Colt history. Now, when this gun started off, it left the factory in 1940, so we have a pre-war Colt, 5.5-inch barrel, blued, standard grips. Basically a standard run-of-the-mill Colt. It was sent back to the factory in 1963 with some very specific instructions, as you can imagine. They wanted a 7.5-inch barrel. They wanted custom grips on there, nickel plate, of course, and factory engraving by Al Herbert, requesting the engraver by name. Now, unfortunately, this very, very specific order was never claimed from the factory. Colt ended up auctioning this off to the highest bidder. And in our research here at Rock Island Auction Company, we found that the gentleman who ordered this very specific and beautiful Colt died of a heart attack 6 months later. And that's why he could never pick up this order. Fantastic coverage. You know, if we compare it to Wilbur Glahn's masterpiece and the level of coverage, look at how much, we know this is sea level coverage, and this is not far behind. We are almost to the edge of the ejector rod housing. We do have wonderful engraving here at the muzzle, copious, deep engraving all over our frame, down our back strap with a little spot maybe for presentation left here. Just a fantastic and beautiful Colt. But besides the great story, besides its high level of embellishment, it also has 2 things that make it unique. Of course, it's in the Pemberton Collection. One is it's in .357 Magnum. Now, we know this gun was produced in 1940. We know .357 Magnum was introduced in 1935. So there's a 5-year window in there where this gun could be produced. In those 5-6 years, only 525 Colt Single Actions were produced in .357 Magnum. So to have a pre-war in .357 Magnum, a rare bird. And that's one window of time. And the second is that it's engraved, master engraved by Al Herbert, who we mentioned earlier. But Herbert doesn't cut for Colt prior to World War II. In fact, he starts in 1952. He engraves for them for 15 years. Sources say he cut as many guns as you normally see engravers cut in 25 years. So he's prolific in his work, and he's cutting for Eisenhower, Charles de Gaulle, Sammy Davis Jr. Important people have his guns. This is his work. It's shipped to the factory in '63, so it puts it neatly into that Al Herbert time frame. And there's research from the Pemberton Collection that states, because of when he was cutting for Colt, that this is the only pre-war Colt single action that he ever cut. So with the caliber and that narrow window, one that escapes sort of that window and gets cut by Al Herbert, just a fascinating gun, and just what a neat window it fits into, plus the gorgeous coverage, plus the condition. I mean, there's not even a drag line. This might have been in the same room as a drag line once. Just a fantastic Colt single action, again, from the Pemberton Collection. And now we'll move from some of these, king of the mountain Colt single actions and the depth that's there alone. And this is just 4 guns. The whole collection, you've got to see it to believe it. We're going to move to some of the other avenues of collecting, whether it's a historic figure, different models, different calibers, etc. So let's get started with just a beautiful 1877 Colt Lightning that's on the table. Now, I didn't pick this because it belonged to a historic figure and it's positively identified, although it is. This was shipped to a Mountie, to a Royal Canadian Mounted Policeman with an extensive service history. Not only does he serve with his unit in Canada, but also in India. Not only does he have this extensive service history, not only does it come with a Royal Canadian Mounted Police badge, but I didn't bring it up here for all that documented history. I didn't even bring it up here because of the presentation inscription here on the back strap, or these just lustrous and iridescent pearl grips. Boy, those grabbed the light really, really nicely. I brought it up here because of just the momentum that Colt Lightnings have in the marketplace now. We've sold several recently, setting and resetting world records, and they're high condition, factory engraved pieces. Well, here we have a factory engraved, high condition Colt 1877 Lightning in fantastic condition. I know we just mentioned the pearl, the historic inscription on the back, but the niter blue on the trigger, the niter blue on the back of the hammer, and this engraving work, which to me is all the more exceptional on these, on a smaller canvas, if you will. Just a wonderful, wonderful example of the depth, again, in the Pemberton collection. Next, a horse of a different color. We have a Colt double action, the second double action on the table, 1889. Now, this is a series I always feel is undervalued. One, for their U.S. service history. Of course, you have the 89 and all the subsequent double actions after that into the 1890s, but also just their place as a double action. I mean, we take them for granted. A lot of the things that are happening here are on our double actions today, with the swing out cylinder, with the latch. Just a beautiful example of an 89. Two things make this one particularly special and worthy of a placement in the Pemberton collection. One is its serial number 3. So absolutely first year production for an 1889. And it ships to C.H. Colt. That is Caldwell Hart Colt, the only surviving offspring of Sam and Elizabeth Colt. And he's sort of this final chapter in this Colt family tragedy. Of course, Samuel Colt dies. His daughter dies. They have a child that's stillborn. Caldwell Colt is the only surviving. It's basically him and his mother living for some time until 1894. Caldwell Hart Colt also dies on his yacht, the Dauntless. He was a yachtsman. He was a bit of a playboy, as you might expect from somebody inheriting the sheer amount of money that he did. But he also did have a bit of his father's interest in firearms. In fact, he's said to have worn a Colt 1889 double action as he was spending time in the Colt factory, helping design the double rifles, another rare Colt with the wonderful Caldwell Colt ties to it. When he was designing those in the factory for he and his friends to go on these big game hunts, he's said to have worn an 1889 on his side. Is this the one? Is it serial number 3? Now, this gun is actually turned into the factory 5 years after his death in 1899 by one of his dear friends, one of his pallbearers. A friend from the yachting club turned it in for another Colt, and that's how it gets back to the factory. Just a fantastic piece, not only of double action history, a early serial production Colt, but also with direct ties, those direct ties to the Colt family and, of course, the Colt family tragedy. Next on the table, whenever you see a Colt single action with precious metal finishes, it is time to sit up and pay attention. In fact, I'm going to flip this around so you can also see the carved pearl grips on this side. Here we have a Colt single action, 45, two-tone. We have gold and silver plating on this, and this is a gun that is identified as presented by Theodore Roosevelt. Now, the gun was originally shipped soft to New York to get this level of engraving on it, but Theodore Roosevelt presents it in 1900 to a James R. Gregory. In fact, we can see the JRG initials there on the butt that have been carved in there. He does it in 1900, and on this carved eagle, we see it sitting on a shield that's dated 1900. Now, James R. Gregory was the chief of police for Colorado Springs. He also has a lot of other law enforcement jobs around the area, so you'll see those in the research as well. It can make it a little bit confusing. But in 1900, Teddy Roosevelt's passing through for political stops. 1900 is actually one of his famous bear hunts, not the famous bear hunt. 1900, he's still there hunting, and he's there for political reasons. Obviously, Mr. Gregory made an impression to be presented a gun like this. Now, this two-tone precious metal finish single action stayed in the Gregory family to about the 1960s. It was then willed or bequeathed to a family friend until the 80s. Then it enters the collector's market. And at one point, the grips and the gun are separated. One of these collectors was selling to a friend, and he removed the grips to help reduce the price so this other friend could buy it. Through sheer chance, Mr. Pemberton finds the grips, and within 24 hours is also contacted about this gun. He's able to put the two together to reunite them after decades apart, and he called it one of the most exciting moments in his collecting life. So think about that. In all the guns he's had, one of the most exciting moments was reuniting these beautiful eagle-carved pearl grips with this stunning, soft-shipped, engraved two-tone precious metal Colt. Love having this on the table, included especially with the historic Roosevelt presentation. Last but not least on the table, just a stunner of a Colt Bisley. Now, why a Colt Bisley? Well, because I like Colt Bisleys and I'm the one in the video. But seriously, again, just another example of the breadth in the collection. This is easily a 95% gun. Beautiful blued all the way down. The case hardening, I love to see grips like this. Checkering is still sharp. There's barely a smudge on a backstrap in those areas where you anticipate a little bit higher wear. It's a phenomenal gun, and if we look at the left side of the barrel here, we do see it is chambered in 38 long Colt. So chambering, it's available at certain points during the production run, but not all the time. For a standard frame Colt Bisley, there's only 412 that are ever chambered in 38 long Colt. It's from the Pemberton Collection. You knew it couldn't have just been a regular high condition Bisley. Ladies and gentlemen, we're 8 guns in, and hopefully now you're starting to see the depth and the breadth of the Brig and Louise Pemberton Collection. Why it's headlining those 6 outstanding world-class Colt collections representing over 250 years of collecting in that December 6th through 8th premier firearms auction. Please come to Bedford, see them for yourselves. It's hard to do guns of this magnitude justice in a video. We invite you to join us in Bedford at our new facility. What a way to commemorate 1 year in our new space than with an offering of this quality. Not only of this quality, but fresh to market. Again, some of these haven't been seen in over half a century. Take the opportunity, put them in your hands, especially on December 5th, our full day of preview. You can come inspect them for yourselves, see how special this offering truly is. We can't wait to see you in Bedford this December.